Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Our guest today is a very, very special guest, Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading, the legendary Lynette Zang. Welcome back.
It's very nice to be back. Thank you so much, Ivan. Legendary? I don't know. That's
Yeah.
always entertaining when people say
Well,
that.
well, you're a legend in our minds, Manette. That's all that
Well,
counts.
then I'll take it. Thank you very much.
So, Manette, we love having you on. Everyone loves you. And I watched the last couple of your videos to prepare, and I wanted to talk about the things that you've been talking about lately that you're passionate about. And one of them seems to be the world reserve currency
Yes.
of the US dollar and what we are doing to it right now. I want to share something on the screen right now. It seems to be penetrating to the Washington, D.C. level that they're creating some risk here to the US dollar. We've weaponized the US
Yeah.
dollar, and other countries might be having second thoughts. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that this is something that's been coming for a really long time. And I think that what they've been doing with Russia has really shown the whole world what they will do to them. But it's not really a big surprise because what tools do they really have anymore? We are now, whether it's official or it's not official, I believe we're in World War III
Mhm.
because it is the whole world.
Yeah. Or the guns are firing in Ukraine, but it seems like there's an economic war occurring everywhere else.
Well, yes, and the way that wars are fought these days are more financial than they are boots on the ground, and I'm not negating anything that's happening to all of those people that are dying, displaced. I mean, it's abhorrent. But what I will say is that the whole world has been watching, and there is a threat. There's a very real cyber threat to our infrastructure
Hmm.
that President Biden just warned us about. Big shocker. I mean, we've been watching these cyber attacks grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And so to take out our really weak infrastructure, I
Hmm.
mean, the electric, the power grid, et cetera. I mean,
Sort of an
I hope
asymmetric.
people are ready.
There's an asymmetric, way to attack without firing, hypersonic missiles, right? You can cause a lot of damage financially by shutting down someone's electric grid, for
Right.
example. And what occurred to me is I think China's watching this very closely, how
Oh,
we
yeah.
what we're doing to Russia, because one of these days I think a lot of people are assuming China's going to try to take Taiwan, right?
Right.
And how will the world respond when China goes after Taiwan? Are we going to try to cut China off? The manufacturing hub of the planet?
Well, when you're talking about that, well, first of all, we're in this world of deglobalization. And globalization, I mean, I remember that talk so much when I first became a stockbroker back in the 80s. And everything was about deglobalization. Well, things work until they don't. It was about corporatism because we shipped all of our jobs away and we basically destroyed the infrastructure for manufacturing in this country. So now we want to get it back. I don't think it's going to be all that easy, when you look at really what's happening. But no currency maintains world reserve status forever. And that country that's maintained it, like the US, I mean, think about this. We were actually giving that back to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, who created the SDR, special drawing rights, back in 1969. But then Kissinger went and created the petrodollar,
Mm-hmm.
so we retained that. But there is a lot of discussion right now between China and Saudi Arabia about selling them oil in for yuan.
I've
And
seen this. Yeah.
exactly. So that's what really enabled us to keep this. And now back to your original point. So the whole world was based on the SWIFT, the US payment system that help money trade all around the world change hands. But we've been watching other countries like, again, China, Russia, India, and actually even the EU over the recent years create alternatives to Swiss.
Yeah, there's now a CIPS. It's a Chinese payment system. Yeah, you're nodding. You know exactly what I'm talking about. They're set up in China, India, and some banks in Europe and Russia. So there is an alternative to SWIFT that's happening right now. And when all this is over, Lynette, do you think Russia is going to come back to the European and American banking system? I mean, why would they expose themselves to that risk ever again?
Well, this is what I find is really interesting in general, okay? So it speaks to this, but it speaks to everything else as well. We are transforming the social, economic, and financial system right now. Right now. So the assumption is that we're going to go back to a normal system, or the system that we have in place will, maybe it'll expand, it'll change a little. But the reality is, and particularly in payments, and especially looking at all the advantages in cryptocurrencies, central bank digital currencies, I mean, how relevant is that old system moving into this new digitized system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's actually, in my opinion, a much more significant and important point, because while we have this playing out on the big global government stage, we also have these similar issues playing out on the individual level stage, and people really need to be aware, because what happened to Canada wasn't a one and done, it was a test. So we don't like your politics, boom, we just cut you out of the system. And somebody else is trying to help you? Maybe help you feed your family? Boom! They are just cut out of the system.
That leads into Canada and what happened in Canada to the truckers and their families and anyone who even donated to them. I know that's a hot topic for you.
Very hot topic.
Walk us through that as to why that's something people should be paying attention to right now. It's not just the country level at Russia or Belarus. It's like they'll do this to you individually also.
Right. And so, does anybody really think that these governments and these corporations have your best interest in mind? Heck no. They want you to just follow what they say. And let's face it, we have had so many losses of freedoms and rights. And if you hold all of your wealth inside of this digitized system, this paper system, this dying system, what do you think is going to happen to your wealth?
And it's gone.
Even if you don't oppose them. This is wealth transfer. You talk about it all the time. Everybody talks about it all the time. Yeah. But yes, it's a hot button because it's real time. We're watching it.
Yeah, gotta have some of these. Gotta have some of these, right?
100%. You gotta have these. You gotta have this out of the system, decentralized, invisible, private. This is just you can carry more wealth in this than in one of these than you can in one of these, but you gotta have both of them.
Yeah. Hey, you're speaking to the choir. You're speaking to the choir here.
Well, I hope I am speaking to the choir, but I also hope that this song goes further than this. So, I'd like to encourage everybody, share, because ignorance does not make you immune. And Canada, okay, when we saw the bank bail-ins in Cyprus, that was all the way over there. That could never happen here. Well, it can. That's the point. This is our neighbor, Canada. My son-in-law is Canadian. Right?
Ivan's Canadian. Ivan's in Edmonton. Yeah.
Oh, my mother-in-law's in Edmonton. Or not my mother-in-law. My daughter's mother-in-law lives in Edmonton. So that's where my son-in-law was raised.
we're trying to get Ivan into the United States on a refugee visa right now, but we're having trouble. Still
Well,
working on it.
so you know this way better than I do, Ivan, because you're living it. And so they said that they were going to now release these accounts, but from what I'm hearing, it's happening super slow.
Yeah.
What are
All the
you
people who were frozen from the truckers, you mean? Yeah.
yeah.
Do you know anyone personally, Ivan, who was frozen or who had some negative consequences from the truckers?
Yeah, there's two people in my friends group in high school who just donated like $5-10 to the GoFundMe, and their whole savings was closed. Still till this day. So you have to go through a process to get out of that. But even that is crazy in itself, that you have, even if you put $5-10 donating to something you feel good about,
Yeah.
your
And it
account is
was totally
closed.
legal at the time they made the donation. It was totally legal, and
Yeah,
there were no threats from the government that this was a problem. It was only weeks later that it became an issue for the government. And I mean, it's like retroactively prosecuting for something that wasn't illegal at the time, which is
brutal.
really scary stuff.
Well, the
Really,
protests weren't illegal at the time either.
yeah.
So what? I mean, we've watched a lot be squashed, particularly since 2020,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? But in some places it's still legal. Where you hear my hesitancy is because it's garbage. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, basically they want you to only say what they want you to say. I think one of the things that's just incredibly fascinating, and they should know better in this day and age with technology, is depending upon where you live, the news is different.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. Hey, I'm going to change the subject a little.
Okay.
Another video you recently did was on hyperinflation, signs to look for. And I saw a pretty big sign this morning. There's the whole food issues going on with the
Huge.
Ukraine is a massive food producer. Some of
Mhm.
the biggest wheat importers in the world are Egypt, um, Indonesia, Turkey. And look at what France is doing now. The French president, he's just going to give out a bunch of, food checks for people to deal with the food crisis. And I'm like, all right, how does giving out a bunch of checks, printing money, create food? I mean, it's not going to create more food. It just creates more euros or, whatever to
Right.
pay
More
for.
inflation.
Yeah, this is a high sign of serious inflation, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's also a sign that the natives are getting restless. In other words, the public is starting to rebel. Because when you are hungry and you can't feed your family, then you make different choices. Like the yellow vest movement that we don't hear anything about. But
Yeah.
that's what this is a sign of. It's that the public is getting really, really restless. Just going back to 1971, because we're talking about the signs, and I was a teenager in the 60s and the 70s because I was born in 1954. And so those repeatable patterns, there were issues around oil, around ethnicity, around women's rights, women's movements.
Mhm.
I mean, and inflation because we were transitioning into a new system,
Mm.
right? So,
Yes.
and then war is always used as a way to justify the money printing and complete the transition.
Yep. Well, this is a great quote about inflation from Thomas Sowell that I just sent out on Twitter the other day. Or I think it was earlier this morning, actually. This is the government, when it creates it, like what the French are doing now is just one example, but it's transferring a part of the value of your money to themselves. It's like,
Yep,
yes, the person who first spends the created new currency derives the maximum benefit from it. It's the people
exactly.
downstream in the economy who are getting screwed by all the prices everywhere rising proportionally with it. Um, and
Exactly. And that's the
and
public.
yeah, that's the public. So the government, by doing what they're doing, they're still it's the biggest tax out there, and it's a lot of people don't understand it. And we're just trying to teach people and understand it a little bit better.
Mhm.
You might also want to put up the Federal Reserve's purchasing power chart because, you know, it goes like this.
Hmm.
And that shows you when they print the money, it loses its purchasing power. So whoever is closest to that, to the central banks, which
Yeah.
are, interestingly enough, it's the corporations. You think it's the government, and they've certainly been all the central banks have certainly been or I don't know if it's all of them, but a lot of them have been monetizing all of the government debt because
Mhm.
there aren't enough buyers of this debt.
Yeah.
No, so yes, it is absolutely. And you know, when they created the system for governments, I mean, they say this in the documents. You have to read it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But they say that they wanted to be able to tax you. But you know, if you're on a gold or, you know, bimetal standard and they tax you, you know about it. And you
Yep.
might not agree to it.
Mm.
But if it's the inflation tax, they don't have to go to legislation. They can just
Exactly.
rob you, and you're going like, "Oh, it's inflation, all that they caused." I mean,
They've almost trained the whole generation to think inflation's normal. We did not used to have such regular, you know, huge. This didn't used to be normal when people were when. Yeah, they've.
it was a normal supply and demand.
Mhm.
So it went like that based on the supply and demand. It didn't go boom, 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 boom. You know, that's because of the system. And corporations, just to conclude that, corporations wanted to pay you less, the workers less. But they knew that if you were working for 10 bucks, you weren't going to accept 5. But if they could make that 10 bucks spend like 5,
Mm.
then hey, average wage 71,9,500, now it's like 58,000, but you need 2 wage earners. And what did they send out the stimulus checks? 150 grand?
Yeah.
Right? Well, why would you need to stimulate if you made $150,000 in 1971, you were really, really rich.
Yeah. And well, here's another sign that I wanted to get into. And this is because Egypt is a major importer of wheat from Ukraine and Russia. 80%
Yep.
of their
Oh,
wheat comes from the Ukraine and Russia. So Egypt is
I,
like one of the canary in the coal mine because they're going to be impacted. And Egypt also has a history of food riots
Mhm.
yes,
and
they do.
social
The Arab
unrest.
Spring, yeah,
Yeah. The Arab Spring is a good example from whatever it was 10 years ago, whenever that happened.
yeah, definitely.
They just devalued their currency 14%. And, you know, dollars are fleeing. They can't get wheat imports now. I saw that Syria, or no, it was Lebanon, who's already gone through hyperinflation. No one's sending any wheat. None of the shippers
Yeah.
or the trading companies will send anything
Exactly.
to Lebanon right now. They're like, there's just not enough, and you're too unreliable in terms of your dollar reserves and your ability to pay for it. There's
Wow.
too much demand elsewhere with no credit risk. So Lebanon's cut out of the wheat market now. It's like, seriously.
But
Wow.
if Lebanon had gold,
Yeah.
they'd still be able to trade.
Yeah, that's true.
They'd still be able to buy their wheat because that's happening in different parts of the world. And I'm telling you, this food issue is not going to get better. I mean, you know, I was talking to David Dubine, you know, he's on Adapt 2030 about the grand solar minimum
Mhm.
and the whole climate change. And it's really fascinating, but he said by May, and we're in March, he said by May, the issue around fertilizer would be really, really publicly
Yeah.
noticeable.
Yeah, fertilizer is a huge export from Russia, um, as you just pointed out. And I mean, how many farmers do you think are planting right now in Ukraine? Probably not a lot.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
ports on the Black Sea. Normally, most of that is exported through the ports on the Black Sea. Well, those are all controlled by Russia right now.
Yep.
So how's Ukraine exporting much of anything right now? Even if they do get a crop planted, fertilized, and Ukraine normally buys most of their fertilizer from Russia.
Right.
Wow.
So even if stuff does get planted, odds are average crop yields per acre are going to be down in a lot of different countries,
Exactly.
And I don't know how this plays out. I saw one report yesterday that the winter wheat crop was already a disaster. We'll see. I would just advise
People don't realize.
people don't
Well,
realize this
how?
is not an immediate
Yeah.
thing. This is a 6 month out. It's a slow moving disaster. And I know you're big on, you're a bit of a organic prepper yourself.
Oh, I'm so thankful that
Yeah.
I have been prepping. And so fertilizer doesn't mean anything to me because I don't use chemicals, but I put in on my little half acre, I put in like 5 ponds. And I
Wow.
have fish in all of those ponds. And they create, and I have chickens and ducks. And all of that creates a lot of fertilizer that
Yeah.
we can just pump out, and that's what we use on here. So I'm really going to encourage people, even a fish tank. I mean, even if you live in an apartment, you have no space. Well, if you go to some place like Lowe's or one of those places, they have those shelving units. You can get a little 10-gallon fish tank, throw some cheapy goldfish in them, and you'll create lots of fertilizer that you can plant and eat your food. And I'm gonna, I mean, I can't. Food is the single biggest issue for people during hyperinflationary events.
Yeah.
And there is no doubt, because here's another big one. This boggles my mind too. And that is, I'm listening to the talking heads. And what are they talking about? Well, the yield curve might invert in June. It's inverting already. That inversion started in January when the 20-year, this year, when the 20-year bond yield became higher than the 30-year bond yield. And now it's working its way down that food chain to shorter and shorter and shorter maturities. The 3 and 5 just inverted yesterday. There was an inversion of one of them on Friday, and the only thing that hasn't inverted yet is the 2-year and the 10-year, and we're close. And that always means, I mean, it has 100% of the time. So
Recession, right?
right, but this is going to be so much more than a recession,
Yeah.
right? Because
I
they
agree.
have no tools.
Popping this bubble is going to be epic. It's going to be something they remember for generations. Like we think of the Great Depression now,
Yes.
90 years later. I think what's happening now and in the coming couple of years, they're going to look back on this period of time,
Yeah.
for generations to come. Would you think that's a fair statement?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think this is one for the books, just like the Great Depression, which, by the way, was also about going into a brand new social, economic, and financial system. By the way.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening here. And I know that they want everything in the system and digitized, but with such a bad infrastructure, with wars being fought, financial wars really more, and the level of control that China has really shown everybody how to do. I mean, governments, how do you control your population? This is happening in real time, and people need to look around because we are in a much smaller world than we used to be. So they shouldn't think, well, that's over there. That can't happen here. Look at how many freedoms in the US that we've lost and how aggressive. I mean, let's face it, they don't like you on certain channels.
Yeah.
Yep. I wonder often, how long is our YouTube gonna last? Some of the things we talk about, but hey, we're here now. And there's always Rumble. There's always a few others out there that we can always move to.
Yeah.
But that's a rebuilding process.
Well, you might want to start that now. I mean, I think that's what we do. We're on a number of channels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're on Gab. We're on Gab also, and Gab's totally disconnected from big tech. They own their own servers.
We'll have to check
They've
that
got
one
their
out.
own video platforms on Gab TV.
Yeah.
Andrew Torba's done a great job of insulating the Gab platform away from big tech and censorship. So that's always going to be an option. And we're already, and hey, just to let the audience know, we're on Gab if you want to go follow us there. So
Well, yeah, I mean, they should know all the places that you are so they can
yeah,
find you just in case, you
yeah,
know. But
Yeah.
and I'll tell you something else. And the strategy that I created for myself, having studied currencies and currency life cycles for since 1987, and I had originally intended to convert, like I have my dynastic wealth collectible coins, and that those just go from generation to generation.
Hmm.
But I had thought that there would be a chunk that I would convert into the new currency when we were on the other side of this mess.
hmm,
Not going to do it. I mean, I will as I need it, so
yeah,
maybe once a month,
yeah,
but there's no way I'm going to do it because if I have this outside of the system and they don't like something I say, I can still survive because I have real money, whether
yeah,
it's gold, silver for barterability.
yeah, that's true. Very true. So, Miss Lynette Zang, we want to thank you so much for giving us some of your time. We really appreciate it. The audience loves you,
Yeah.
and we'd love to talk to you again in another 3 months or so as this crazy year develops.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, things are changing so fast right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette.